Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Just days after getting back on track, yet another setback for North County Railway passengers. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Trains heading in and out of San Diego are once again disrupted by a landslide in San Clemente. KPBS North County reporter Alexander Nguyen talks to some riders affected by the latest track closure.
That one made it to the track.
This Amtrak train was almost caught in a landslide yesterday. Officials say the conductor spotted soil and rocks on the tracks and stopped short of the landslide. The train never made it through San Clemente and returned to Oceanside. This is the third time a landslide has disrupted the train service between San Diego and Orange County since last fall, and the second time in this spot at Casa Romantica in the last 2 months. The Orange County Transportation Authority, which owns the tracks through Orange County, says in a statement that it understands customers' frustration. We unfortunately have been forced to halt rail service again, especially during the summer travel season. The OTCA says it is working with stakeholders to reopen the tracks as soon as possible. Some riders were frustrated by the disruption.
Oh my God, am I going to get up for my grandson's graduation?
But most of the people we talked to were taking it in stride.
They're very helpful.
Like Linda Salvati, who was in town to celebrate her brother's and sister's birthdays.
Then the landslide happened and heard about that. And I thought, oh, well, I can come to Oceanside, and I've done this before where they have a problem with the tracks.
If you're heading north, this is the end of the line. From here, you would have to jump on the bus to go to Irvine.
Amtrak says for now, there will be a bus bridge between Oceanside and Irvine for riders to complete their trip. Paul Linham is visiting from Australia. He took the bus bridge down to Oceanside and said it was very comfortable.
And I managed to see a lot more than I would have perhaps if I'd been in a car.
For Metrolink riders, there won't be any service through to San Diego. The last stop is the Laguna Niguel Mission Viejo station. It's unclear when the tracks will reopen. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
San Diego County health officials are urging people most at risk for Mpox to get vaccinated. As KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman explains, it follows a CDC warning that the virus could resurge.
Anyone can contract Mpox, but those most at risk include gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men. The virus, previously called monkeypox, spreads through close contact, including sex. Mpox started spreading around this time last year, and since then, about 470 cases have been reported in San Diego, with no new cases since February. The CDC is warning with summer events around the corner, the virus could start spreading again. More than 20 cases were reported in Chicago last month.
We were most concerned about the outbreak that we saw in Chicago, and what we're advising is that folks at risk for Mpox should get up to date.
The CDC estimates 2 doses of vaccine are more than 80% effective at preventing infection. San Diego County Deputy Public Health Officer Dr. Cameron Kaiser says people who have already been fully vaccinated don't need it again.
We're not seeing the virus in wastewater here, and we don't have any cases right now, but that doesn't mean we want any. And while you can be vaccinated and still potentially get Mpox, the disease is milder and you're much less likely to have serious complications from it.
Public health officials are getting the word out about vaccinations at the start of Pride Month, ahead of large LGBTQ+ Pride events planned for San Diego next month. In the past year, 18 residents were hospitalized with Mpox and no deaths were reported.
We attribute that to the great work that our community partners have done spreading the word that getting vaccinated really makes the difference. And we're asking folks to do it again to help prevent further cases.
County health officials say there's plenty of Mpox vaccines available. People can get them from their healthcare providers or at county STD clinics. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
There are calls to stop all surgeries at Zion Medical Center over concerns about the sterilization of their equipment. A Kaiser employee at the hospital says the surgical tools don't meet their sterilization standards. The allegation comes after Kaiser Zion acknowledged that they had an issue with their hot water lines at the facility. The Kaiser employee says she and dozens of other employees signed a letter demanding surgeries stop until the issues are fixed. Kaiser says it's only conducting necessary operations with tools that have been cleaned and processed at 2 outside facilities. Teachers and other certified employees at the San Diego Unified School District are just days away from a new contract, and if a majority of union members approve it. KPBS education reporter MG Perez has the latest on this historic labor vote.
That's what I'm talking about, my friend. I love that. Okay.
Thomas Courtney has been teaching here at Choyas Mead Elementary School for the past 24 years. He is guiding students through their end-of-semester science project in this combination 4th and 5th grade class. He is also preparing to vote for a new contract with the San Diego Unified School District like he's never seen before.
My elation really comes from the fact that it's a union and a district negotiation that ended in a good, positive way. I think it's a benefit for everybody, really.
Oh, and after school, the community is going to have a lot more say in what our after-school programs are.
Lunchtime union meetings like this one at Millennial Tech Middle School are happening across the district this week as educators get educated on the details of their new contract. More than 6,000 certificated employees are voting by paper ballots, which are being collected on campuses and at headquarters for the San Diego Education Association, which has built a coalition with sibling unions and others to win big.
That was the difference maker in sending a clear message to the district that educators, parents, community organizations were united to win these improvements for our school communities.
A look at the tentative contract summary highlights include a 15% pay raise over 2 years, a lump sum payment retroactive to July 2022, a required lower class size for every kindergarten to 3rd grade room, and an increase in counselors and full-time nurses. If the contract is approved, the lump sum payment will come in August and September, just as the new school year begins. The amount of that payment will range from $7,000 to $10,000 before taxes, dependent on an educator's length of employment.
And don't be afraid to use that marker. You can draw it all over that map.
For veteran teachers like Mr. Courtney, that's a big payday, and he says it is also a big incentive to keep teachers coming back each year.
Bingo. What else?
Especially the new ones who he continues to mentor.
Teaching's not easy, right? You know you're passionate about it, but we know it's hard. We know the realities of it. But stick around. It's going to be worthwhile. And what your work, the work you put in, is going to be fairly compensated.
Stick it right in there. There we go. All right.
Ballots will be collected through Thursday, with the results expected by the end of this weekend. MG Perez, KPBS News.
Hollywood writers could soon have some reinforcements on the picket line. SAG-AFTRA, the union representing TV and film actors, voted to authorize a strike against major studios if a new contract is not reached by June 30th. The union is set to begin talks with studios for a new deal tomorrow. Meanwhile, studios have reached a tentative deal with the Directors Guild, but not everyone is happy about it. Jeff Wynn has that part of the story.
With no end in sight for the Hollywood writers' strike, Sue Mason says she's fighting for the future of the entertainment industry.
Our labor is being devalued everywhere.
Members of the Writers Guild of America had been hoping for solidarity with other Hollywood unions, but on Sunday, the Directors Guild of America struck a tentative deal with the Alliance of Motion Pictures and Television Producers.
It frankly doesn't change much for the Writers Guild.
WGA says it's going to charge forward with the same demands for more pay and higher residuals. On Monday, members handed out leaflets at the Apple Store at the Grove because the tech giant also streams movies and shows shows on its Apple TV Plus.
To remind the folks who are visiting those stores that, the people who are making the shows that they're going to watch on these Apple devices are not able to make a living anymore.
Similar demonstrations were done at about a dozen Apple stores around the country on the same day Apple held its developer conference.
This corporate greed has got to go.
The AMPTP has declined to comment on the tentative deal with the DGA or the stalemate with the writers, but it previously pushed back on the union demands, pointing to the recent layoffs at Disney, Warner Brothers Discovery, and Paramount Global, which is the parent company of KCAL News. As the writer's strike enters its sixth week, entertainment attorney and journalist Jonathan Handel says the fall season for the broadcast networks may start without scripted programming.
On the other hand, the streamers such as Netflix would probably be happy to see the fall scripted broadcast season destroyed because it would drive viewers to streaming platforms. So when the companies aren't even on the same page necessarily, that makes it harder to get a deal done across the table.
And that was Jeff Wynn reporting. The DGA agreement still needs approval from its national board, which is expected sometime today. And after that, details of the deal will be released. Religious groups are working with Sacramento city leaders to shelter and feed dozens of South American migrants flown to the state capital. California officials are considering whether Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and his administration should face charges such as kidnapping for arranging the flights. A Texas sheriff's office announced it had recommended criminal charges over 2 flights of migrants taken to Martha's Vineyard last year. It's not clear whether the local district attorney will pursue the charges. Records show that hundreds of immigration and customs enforcement agents and contractors abused confidential databases. KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis says those agents have access to lots of personal data.
In San Diego, one ICE agent used federal databases to spy on his ex-wife's new boyfriend. Another agent used the database to give a detainee's private information to someone who wasn't authorized to have it. Those are just a few examples of misconduct. In San Diego and Imperial counties, 26 ICE agents and contractors were investigated for this type of behavior between 2016 and 2019, records show. Most of these employees improperly used computers and databases. In fact, the most common violation was using federal law enforcement databases for self-queries, or just looking yourself up.
They might seem like low-level offenses.
David Moss is policy director at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. He says looking yourself up on a database may not seem like a big deal.
But what they do is tell a broader picture of the culture of DHS and ICE and CBP.
And that broader picture could include more serious violations. And that creates public mistrust.
People feel like they're not being watched and they can look up whatever they want in the database. And maybe that starts with them looking up themselves, and maybe that progresses to looking up their ex-wives.
Part of what makes this so concerning for Moss is the sheer amount of personal data these databases have about us. He says they can track our movements with license plate readers. They have information about where we work and who we spend time with.
They may have like a massive amount of information. They keep ingesting more and more. It's very difficult to know the full breadth of information they have.
In fact, in 2018, some of those databases were used to track lawyers and humanitarian workers helping migrants in Tijuana. That included Nicole Ramos. She's a director of Al Otro Lado's Border Rights Project, which gives legal advice to asylum seekers trapped in Mexico. Ramos was one of the people under surveillance. Customs and Border Protection even had a dossier on her.
And that included information such as my mother's name, where she lives in the interior, my travel, including international travel that did not originate in the U.S., my car license model.
This type of surveillance has real-world consequences. Ramos first found out that something was off when CBP agents sent her to a secondary inspection.
That was when a supervisor confiscated my global entry card.
Global entry cards are vital for people who live on the border. They allow people to cross through special car and pedestrian lanes that are much faster than the general lanes. Having one of those cards is the difference between crossing the border in 30 minutes or 3 hours. Records show that some ICE agents faced little discipline after their violations were sustained. For example, That agent who used the database to spy on his ex-wife's new boyfriend, that case was not referred to management. Same thing with another agent who did a license plate search without authorization. Immigration and Customs Enforcement did not respond to a request for comment.
There is zero transparency and zero accountability.
Ramos says she's still under surveillance. She avoids crossing the border unless she absolutely has to.
People might say, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you don't have anything to worry about. But the fact that I'm not doing anything wrong should be enough for the government to not surveil us and keep us on a watch list.
Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
The Keeling curve is giving us more bad news about carbon emissions building up in the atmosphere. The Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii measures carbon dioxide molecules in dry air, and the charted data is called the Keeling curve. On Monday, the federal agency NOAA and the Scripps Institution of Oceanography reported the fourth highest year-to-year increase in carbon dioxide ever recorded. And today, atmospheric carbon totals 424 parts per million, or ppm, which is a new record.
So we certainly hope to start seeing the flattening of this Keeling curve or the global atmospheric CO2 trend. But based on what we observed, this is not yet happening. And we, in the past decades, actually seeing very often more than 2 ppm annual increase of CO2 in the atmosphere. And that is quite significant comparing to our earlier records from 1960s, 1970s. So we are pretty far away from seeing a flattening of the CO2 curve.
And the four biggest increases in the Keeling curve have all occurred in the past decade. The Keeling curve has been rising every year since Scripps Institution began it in the late 1950s.
Not one, but two upper-level lows will be following over the course of the next several days. And what does that mean? Well, it's a combination of the cool conditions, especially just west of the deserts, and also extensive cloud coverage, especially toward the coastline. We'll let you know if we could see any weekend changes coming up here in just a moment. Otherwise, we venture our way into the overnight. Again, increasing clouds. Overnight low temperature dropping down to right around 60. Oceanside, Chula Vista, mid to upper 50s. Over the interior toward Ramona, 53. Mount Laguna into the mid 40s. And Borrego Springs around 59. Again, extensive cloud coverage will continue. Again, as we've also seen, again, some areas of showers off to the north. Well north of Oceanside, towards some of the San Bernardino County mountains. That's the upper level low spinning about. That will produce additional showers and even some downpours as we go into Wednesday morning. But we're a little too far south. Again, looking at extensive cloud coverage continuing. That begins to fade as we work our way into the afternoon time frame. It's going to be a slow process, especially toward the coast. A little bit quicker here towards some of the inland valley locations. Ramona at 71. Chula Vista 69. Borrego Springs topping off into the upper 80s. So it's a new month. And again, historical average rainfall, again, going from May into June, transitions down to right around 0.05 of an inch. We really don't start to see the wet season kick in again until we head into the fall season. Let's take you through time here, and here's a look at the coast. Again, low clouds breaking for some sunshine on a daily basis as we work our way throughout the next several days into the weekend. That next upper level low will be spinning about, and this will keep temperatures in check. We'll see a little bit of a reprieve against from that extensive cloudiness here on Friday over the interior valleys, and we'll try to inch the numbers up into the mid-70s, but next upper level low spins about heading into the weekend. Could even see a morning shower with that this weekend, along with cooler air into the mountains. Similar situation. It stays cool throughout, along with some sunshine and into the deserts. And notice the numbers here at their warmest heading in toward Friday and Saturday. Another round of cooler air coming in by Sunday. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Povick.
KPBS's newest podcast released its final episode today. Freeway Exit is about the past, present, and future of San Diego's freeways. And KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen is the creator and host, and he joins me to tell us more. Andrew, the podcast has received a lot of positive feedback since it launched, but what can listeners expect to hear in episode 6?
Well, Maya, this final episode focuses on the future of our freeways in San Diego and how our relationship with the freeway really has to change if we're serious about our goals of fighting climate change. We look at the idea of holding events on freeways where they're temporarily shut down to cars and opened up for people to bike and walk on them. And I went to one such event on the 15 freeway a few months ago, and you'll hear about that in episode 6. And we just did this last Sunday on the 163 for the Rock and Roll Marathon. I went there, I took a bunch of videos, and I was really struck by how much quieter and more peaceful Balboa Park is without all of that traffic noise from the freeway going through it. Now, here's a clip from Brer Marsh, who's a local architect featured in the podcast, and he's talking about this idea of letting people experience a freeway with no cars on it and how that can really change your perspective.
I want people to see the value of this space and what we've given up. And through that, feeling that they have ownership over it and that they can perhaps have a little more control over that part of their environment, which has been reallocated to some other use, right? Traffic. If people can use it, even just occasionally, maybe they'll start to care about it more, and maybe they'll start to recognize that this space has value, and it's a place that they want to be and they want to experience as pedestrians or on bikes or running. So I think the power of taking back a space, even if just for a moment, is undeniable.
I love that, Andrew. It's about experiencing spaces differently. Now, your podcast looks at 2 freeways in San Francisco that were actually torn down in the 90s and how surprisingly successful those projects have been. Is freeway removal something that you think could ever happen here in San Diego?
Well, Maya, this was one of the most surprising and exciting discoveries that I made while working on this podcast. San Diego has actually already said yes to removing a freeway. There's a proposal for tearing down a very small segment of our freeway network that was actually never meant to get built in the first place. And in its place, there would be a neighborhood with housing, some businesses, and a park. And this was approved by the City Council in 2015, but it's still a very long way from happening. Now, I'm not going to say where this is. People will have to listen to the podcast to find out. And now that all the episodes are streaming, you can binge the whole series from start to finish.
Very interesting. Thanks, Andrew. We'll all have to have a listen. Now, KPBS is holding an event this Saturday, June 10th, to talk about the podcast and the future of transportation in San Diego. And you can find the details at kpbs.org/freewayexit.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, a dam collapse in southern Ukraine submerges hundreds of homes. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
A big milestone reached today in La Jolla Shores. Crews removed the last overhead utility pole, completing another phase of the City of San Diego's undergrounding project. And since the project started in 2019, 1.8 miles of underground electrical, telephone, and broadband lines servicing 181 homes in the neighborhood. The city is moving around 15 miles of overhead lines underground each year, but there are still about 1,000 miles of overhead lines within the city. June 6th of 1963 was a day very much like today in San Diego, with overcast skies and a high of 68 degrees. But the day was different in one major way. The President of the United States was in town. KPBS reporter John Carroll looks back on John F. Kennedy's trip to our city.
President Kennedy's plane has just arrived after a 2-hour, 40-minute flight from El Paso, Texas, where the president spent last night on his Western tour.
60 years ago today, Air Force One, then a Boeing 707, landed at Lindbergh Field. President Kennedy was initially coming just to inspect the troops at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot, but at the urging of then San Diego State College President Dr. Malcolm Love, then California Governor Pat Brown invited the president to give the commencement speech to the class of 1963. He received the first honorary degree given by the school in the old Aztec Bowl, where Viejas Arena sits now.
I want to express a very strong sense of appreciation for the honor that you have given to me today to be an instant graduate of this distinguished college. It is greatly appreciated.
Kennedy would go on to extol the education system in California from kindergarten all the way through the collegiate level.
No free society can possibly be sustained unless it has an educated citizenry whose qualities of mind and heart permit it to take part in the complicated and increasingly sophisticated decisions that pour not only upon the President and upon the Congress, but upon all the citizens who exercise the ultimate power.
Here is the President's helicopter.
After his brief remarks at San Diego State, the president boarded Marine One and flew over to MCRD. After inspecting the troops, the president, a veteran of World War II, delivered a short speech.
And in the years to come, those who oppose us, those who wish us ill, must contend with the strong determination of Americans to not only endure and survive, but also to prevail.
Apart from the president's visit to San Diego State and MCRD, there is one other place where his trip here is memorialized.
It's here on the side of Rudford's restaurant along El Cajon Boulevard. A local teen snapped a picture of the president in his motorcade as they made their way out to San Diego State. Nearly 6 months later, the president would take an assassin's bullet in a similar motorcade. But for those who are still around, the memories of that day, June 6th, are no doubt happy of a truly historic day in San Diego. John Carroll, KPBS News.
And the video in the story came from film originally produced by KFMB TV, but it was released to us through the archives of San Diego State University. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. By viewers like you. Thank you.